All right, so good evening, everyone. Welcome back to our episode. So you're tuned in to Estudiante Blues, only here in the Greatness Hub online channel, the only online channel affiliated with iHelp Coaching and Business Solutions Incorporated. So I would like to invite everyone to please like, subscribe, and of course, binge watch all our programs here at the Greatness Hub online channel. So kindly share also our programs with your friends. And if I may share my screen with you. All right, so welcome back. So our topic for this evening is entitled Zoom Fatigue. And so why did I choose to have this title? It's already semester break for our students, and during the 1 year of academic journey, we often hear that students encounter and the so-called Zoom fatigue. So what is this Zoom fatigue and how are we able to actually avoid experiencing such? Since in the next school year, we've heard and we've known from the Department of Education as well as the higher education that we will still be holding our classes via online. So for students to prepare for the next semester 2021-2022, we will be discussing everything about Zoom fatigue and how to avoid it so that for the next online class next school year, they'll be able to prepare and avoid experiencing such. So let's dive into our discussion. All right. So what is Zoom fatigue? And so big word, guys, no? We're all familiar with this. So we're given two important words in the definition of Zoom fatigue. So what are those words? First, of course, we have the definition of Zoom. And then we also have fatigue as part of our two big words. Now, we all know what Zoom is, and we all experience the benefits of the Zoom as one of our online learning modality. And so aside from Zoom, we also have other elements, no, mode of learning. So bakit Zoom? We also have MS Teams, we also have Meet, we also have Google Meet, we have Airtable, we have Canvas, and a whole lot more. But then Zoom is, I think, most popular of all these learning modalities. And of course, from the term itself, fatigue, we are all familiar with the term fatigue, so it is synonymous to exhaustion. Sa Tagalog, pagod. So with the two words combined, when we say Zoom fatigue, this is associated with the different signs, symptoms, and syndrome of physical exhaustion associated with the long, extended hours we experience or we immerse ourselves in our online classes using these different modes of online learning or video conferencing during our day-to-day class online experiences. Okay, so let's discuss the different subtopics under Zoom fatigue. All right, so online class scenario. So let us come to think of it. Let us reflect. Let us picture in our mind and what is it like on a daily basis, our scenario, our typical online activities when we are having our online class. If we could just close our eyes for a moment, picture in our mind, what do we see in our desktop screen, laptop screen, or if we are having our classes via mobile phone, what is typically found in your day? So basically, when we experience the pandemic scenario, diba, from the typical face-to-face class that we used to have during the old type of learning, old normal, and transition to the new normal. Ayan, so we have our online classes at this point in time. When the onset of your online class come into fruition and reality, the adjustment itself from face-to-face to online class is actually presented in a whole lot of overwhelming apprehension. And for the longest time, students, particularly in the college department, since they are used to face-to-face classes and doing everything on a physical level, face-to-face with classmates, teachers, and everybody in the school community, knowing and learning that mode of classes or mode of learning will be transitioned to an online class, it already presented a very negative scenario in their mind. There are a whole lot of negative apprehensions and negative thoughts associated with the transition from face-to-face to online class. And the online class presented itself with a whole lot of negativity. So the huge adjustment in the way classes are conducted put a toll in not just the student physical, mental, social, and the entire well-being, but also the teachers, the staff, and everything in the school community as well as the employment or the workforce. And since we cannot do anything about it, and since we have to move along, move on with our life, everybody adjusted to the scenario. So there is a huge adjustment because we are only given a very limited time to accommodate the transition, and we were not able to be given an ample time to adjust. And since the pandemic started March of 2020, and classes actually is prepared to start June of 2020, we are just given around 2 months to prepare. It's a good thing that we adjusted the start of the class by July or August of the coming 2020-2021 school year. And teachers prepared and trained to adjust to the online classes with their module making and video preparations and learning everything all about the online learning, the different modalities that can be used in preparation for the online class. Everything in connection with the online classes and the adjustments associated with it actually has given teachers, employees, faculty, and staff a whole lot of adjustments and a whole lot of stress. Diba? Yan. So, the online class adjustments is actually one of the reasons why students, faculty, staff, and everything in the school community experience and share the so-called Zoom fatigue. So, the exhaustion associated with online classes. Now, what are the different reasons why students, faculty, staff, and the entire community experiences Zoom fatigue? One reason is that, according to research, the adjustment of students, faculty, and staff who are not used to being on video on an extended hour gives them a kind of anxiety. So being on video for the first time actually gives a person some sort of an anxious feeling. And thinking that they will be exposed to or they will be required to be on video during the entire class session for the entire day, for the entire semester, and the entire school year actually gives them that negative apprehension, that anxious feeling, and that extended amount of stress for the entire school year. So that actually is one reason why students experiences the idea of Zoom fatigue, diba? Especially people or students who are not used to being exposed to other individuals, particularly those who are introverted type of personality, but also the extroverts as well. Okay, so people who are not used to be on video experiences some kind of anxiety which form part of Zoom fatigue. Another reason why students, faculty, and staff and experiences the so-called Zoom fatigue is that they did schedule back-to-back classes, particularly in the high school department, or be it in the junior high school or the senior high school. They do have a back-to-back class schedule. And what does back-to-back schedule of classes have to do with Zoom fatigue? Okay, try to imagine in a regular class of 1 hour, that's one unit in high school. So 1 hour every single day for 1 week, for 1 month, for one semester, or for one school year with an open camp. And how many subjects do you have in a day? So usually high school and college immerse themselves in like 5, 6 hours of classes on a regular basis, spending 5 hours on a back-to-back classes exposed to video conferencing would really take its toll on the physical and mental health of each and every individual student, more especially to those students who are really not used to exposing themselves online. And I think since majority of us, experience online classes for the first time during this pandemic situation, extended hours of exposure to video conferencing or online classes as we call it via different LMS mode of learning is one of the reasons why we experience rather Zoom fatigue. Is a back to back. All right. Another reason is that some, if not most of us, are not used to be engaging with people or other people. Personality-wise, introverted individuals are definitely not into engaging to other people. And even introverted ones, even if they are used to be with the company of other people, being exposed to video conferencing, attending meetings, attending seminars with a whole lot of audiences for an extended number of hours for a day on a regular basis actually is also very tiresome to the physical, to the mental health of individuals. And if a person, a group of individuals, if people are not used to engaging with other people for the longest time, which actually is one of the many features of online classes and online webinars, right? These actually are one of the reasons why people, students, we as part of the online classes experience also Zoom fatigue. Okay, so next one. Ayan, so being the focal point is another reason why students, teachers, experiences Zoom fatigue. So what do we mean by being the focal point? Okay, at one point in your Zoom class or in your online class, students usually are tasked to, like, say, do a report or is required to present an output or present a project. So at one point in their online class, they do present with in front of classmates or group of individuals. And time and again, when we say people not used to presenting in front of other people, it gives them some sort of a feeling of anxiety, okay, being the focal point of that certain situation or that particular scenario. Either be it one, presenting an output, you will be put into the center stage and thinking or knowing that all participants inside that particular class or Zoom room, if we call it, or the virtual classroom, you have two sets of eyes with 50 classes, 50 students in the class, or at certain point, more than 50 students with 100 pairs of eyes looking at you at the back of your mind, gives you some sort of an anxious feeling, which adds up to the feeling of Zoom fatigue. Ayan, so that is another reason why you experience that kind of exhaustion. Okay, another one is technical issue. And we experience a whole lot of technical issues during our online classes. When we say technical issues, these are actually some of the downside of having online classes. And since we are not all technical people and we leave it to technical experts, which are people part of the institution we belong or the school that we are enrolled in, we cannot do away with technical problems and glitches when it comes to online classes. And when we do experience technical issues, ayan, we also experience some sort of anxiety, which leads to Zoom fatigue once more. And these are part of our day-to-day routine. And so it adds more to our feeling of experiencing Zoom fatigue. And when we experience technical issues, actually, we feel helpless because we cannot do anything about it, especially the seasoned teachers in particular, and those who are not that well versed when it comes to technology. And all of us share the same experience of feeling anxious about doing our tasks online, especially when we experience this technical issue, because we feel so helpless because we cannot do anything about it. So what are the common technical issues that we often encounter during our online classes? So when we say technical issues, that has something to do with one, glitches in our computer. Yeah, glitches in our computer. I usually experience that. Like say, for example, transitioning from one LMS application, like transitioning from Zoom video conferencing to MS Team video conferencing to Google Meet conferencing to Airtable G-Lead, and a whole lot more. Sometimes, due to technical capacity, I often experience not having audio or at certain times um, lagging of internet connection. Sometimes the video is not compatible with a certain application and a whole lot more. And if we do experience technical glitches that we cannot explain, particularly when we are doing FB Live, ayan. O when everybody got to see what's happening inside the virtual room, it really gives me stress, so much stress. Okay, so all of these things actually adds up to the feeling of Zoom fatigue. All right, so after learning after learning all the different reasons why we experiencing Zoom fatigue, and we go now to the different symptoms of Zoom fatigue. So how do we know that we are actually experiencing Zoom fatigue already? Okay, so these are the different symptoms or signs of experiencing Zoom fatigue. So one, there is a feeling of tiredness in between calls. Now, since we experience or we schedule our classes almost back to back to back to back, and transitioning from one class to another class actually gives us a bit of feeling tired. Yan. So attending one class for like 1.5 hours or 1 hour video, listening to discussions, focusing our attention to a particular reporter or discussant, and then taking mental notes of everything that's being discussed, attending to other tasks or thinking a whole lot more, and knowing that we are to attend like two or more classes after this one. Okay, so transitioning from one class to another class, ayan, gives us a feeling of tiredness or exhaustion. So if you feel like you are tired after one class or two classes, that is one symptom of Zoom fatigue. Okay? So you're experiencing Zoom fatigue already. So we move on to the next. All right. So at the end of the day, so if you have like two classes, three classes, or more classes in a day, the feeling of tiredness after one class and then moving on to the next class, another set of tired feelings to the next class. So at the end of the day, when you're done with all your classes, you feel like you are actually more tired than ever. There is a feeling of exhaustion. Super duper exhausted ka na. Or at the end of the day, if your day is long and you did so much activities during your particular time of the day, there is a feeling that you are wasted. Ayan. Lobat kung tawagin. And after your class, I think you still spend more time online yan, in your social media. So that's another symptom. So at the end of the day, after all your classes and all your activities, you really feel more tired or exhausted. At certain days, you feel like you are wasted. And when you lie down in your bed to rest, it's just like you are knocked down yan, with a knockout punch. TKO, technical knockout. Another reason and another symptoms of Zoom fatigue, a daydreaming instead of paying attention. And if you are like a person who are not able to focus entirely on the discussion of a particular subject and your mind is actually wandering off to a whole lot of things instead of focusing to what the discussant is actually sharing with you. So that is one of the symptoms of Zoom fatigue. It's just like you can no longer absorb what is being given to you. Your mind is not anymore functioning as students may often call it. Okay, so you would rather go someplace else instead of you being in the present moment in of the situation of what is happening right now. So you tend to wander off and you tend to think a whole lot of other things rather than focusing of what is being discussed with you at the present time. Okay, so that is one of the symptoms that you are already experiencing Zoom fatigue. We move on to the next. All right, so there is oversweating or overheating or sweating. And if you experience that your body is feeling heated, ayan, at the end of one particular Zoom conference or virtual class, or if you feel like you are sweaty or sweating or feeling kinda hot. Ayan. So that is also one symptoms of Zoom fatigue. Now why is that? If you are anxious, diba? If you are anxious already, if you are feeling um, tired and feeling stressed out, you actually are releasing, your body is actually activated more. So when you are anxious, when you are stressed, Yan, you are producing actually negative hormones, negative hormones, which is if um, exposed to this kind of situation, you're releasing negative hormones that is actually getting or putting its toll or giving your body um, extended kind of stress is one of the reasons we become ill or sick or our what do you call it, immune system. Ayan. Our immune system actually is lowered. And lowered immune system leads to illnesses or diseases. Ayan. So, at the end of the day or at the end of one particular class, if you feel like you are overheating or if you feel like you are sweaty or sweating more than the usual, and that is one symptom that you are experiencing already, Zoom fatigue. Alright, so another symptom of Zoom fatigue is eye strain or irritation. Yan. If you do experience eye strain and itchy eyes, tired eyes, irritated eyes, yan, that is one symptom that you are experiencing already Zoom fatigue. Now, why is that so? Long exposure, extended exposure at that of our eyes, focusing on the TV screen actually gives us an eye strain. So, ibig sabihin, with how many subjects in a day, like 6 hours straight with a back-to-back class schedule, focusing your eyes on the monitor actually would really lead to eye strain. And try to imagine you are doing this for 5 days in a week, 5 hours or 6 hours straight, focusing your eyes on your computer monitor or laptop or desktop or even in your cell phone or tablet. That would really put a strain on our eyes and would cause irritation and sometimes would actually cause um, another type of illness or disease or complications. So once again, if you experiencing eye strain or eye irritation, that is one of the many symptoms or syndrome of experiencing Zoom fatigue. At eto pa, ayan. So if you also experience prolonged exposure to computer computer screens, laptop screens, desktop screen, especially mobile, yan, mobile phones or tablets being small, it could lead to a regular bout of headaches and at certain extent, ayan, migraine. Kaya pala lagi masakit ang ulo ko, no? Working 9 hours in a day, straight facing the desktop or the laptop, ayan, we accumulate this stress and eventually leads to experiencing a regular bout to headaches or migraine. So, yan po ang mga causes in the symptoms of Zoom fatigue. And most of all, ayan, Zoom fatigue gives us the symptom of constant feeling of exhaustion. So, accumulated all of these symptoms and syndrome, at the end of the day, prolonged exposure to our online classes gives us a constant feeling of exhaustion. So, from feeling tired from one class to another, di ba po? And then, extending so much hours focusing on our television, computer screens, or mobile screens. Ayan. At the end of the day, we do experience constant feeling of exhaustion because all of this actually compounds And when it is compounded, ayan, at the end of a particular period in time, we feel we really are wasted. And eventually, little by little, this compounding of feeling of exhaustion leads to the feeling of tiredness, feeling of exhaustion, feeling of fatigue, and eventually feeling so tired at the end of the day. And since we all feel negatively with all our prolonged exposure to our online classes, at the end of the day, because of the ill feeling associated with the online classes, there is already a build up of anxiety, and we are actually get the feeling of anxiousness and that we do not want to even turn on our cameras anymore. All right, so the different tips on how to avoid Zoom fatigue are as follows. So the first one, top of the list, is stop multitasking. So why is multitasking on top of the different tips to avoid Zoom fatigue? So if you would remember earlier in this program, we requested you to think about and reflect or visualize what is it like typically your day-to-day academic experience when you are having your online class. So how does an online class look like for a typical student? If I would, usually during my online class, so my desktop screen would usually look like an open Zoom application, diba? Zoom application for my online meetings. At certain times, or most of the times rather, we use MS Teams. And typically, applications opened during the day until wee hours of the night. So it's a regular thing that we open the messenger because it's our main means of communicating via messaging. We also open our Yahoo Mail, Gmail, and Outlook so that we will be able to monitor our incoming messages, emails. Usually, it's also open yung Facebook, and at certain instances when we have meetings and all, a whole lot of video conferencing is open. And you can also see on the tab different applications. So for a certain student, or typically students would usually open one, the video conferencing or the LMS application being used in their certain particular class. At certain times, also they use different applications depending on the capacity of the student or depending on the capacity of the teacher. And on top of the LMS being used for online classes, you could actually see other applications open. And most often than not, students do multitasking. Now, why is multitasking one of the reasons why we experience Zoom fatigue? And why should we avoid multitasking? It's very plain and simple. We often believe that multitasking makes us more productive. Ulitin ko. Multitasking, we have this notion, we have this idea, we have this belief that when we do multitasking, and we often say, I'm a multitasker, no? We often say that multitasking makes us more productive. But actually, according to research, it's otherwise. The result is actually on the opposite of you being productive. Why? simply because you cannot serve two masters at the same time. Our attention and efficiency is actually limited to. Yan, limited to. Limited lang siya. Okay. So, doing a whole lot of things simultaneously actually gives or puts a toll on our physical as well as mental capacity. So, if we are able to focus at one particular activity at one particular point in time and able to push through and finish that particular task, it would actually be beneficial for us and helps us avoid Zoom fatigue. They come to think of it, transferring from one app to another, talking to a whole lot of different people at the same time, attending conferences, Zoom meetings, simultaneously at one particular time, shifting from one character to another actually is very difficult. And it adds up to us experiencing Zoom fatigue. So for us to avoid experiencing the negative effects of Zoom fatigue, top of the list is stop multitasking. The tip is that focus on one particular task at one particular time and push through that particular activity and finish. So when you're done with that, then move on to the next. Okay, the benefit is that you're able to focus your attention and your energy at one particular activity, okay, and finishing that particular activity adds up to your productivity. Okay, so next one. All right. So the next thing is that for us to avoid Zoom fatigue as much as possible, if you have the chance to choose your own schedule, and avoid scheduling a back-to-back to class. Now, this could be applicable to college students because they have the privilege to choose their subjects. But for the high school, I guess this will not be feasible or possible because their regular class schedule is blocked and most often than not, their class schedule is assigned usually on a back-to-back schedule from one subject to another. But if you are given the privilege to choose your subject, ayan, for you to avoid experiencing Zoom fatigue, try not to schedule a back-to-back class. So as much as possible, you must give some free time in between classes so that you'll be able to rest for a while before you move on to the next. Actually, this is the reason why 1.5 hours of class. Usually, when you do it online, you're only given 1 hour of video conferencing or online class, and the 30 minutes would be given as an asynchronous activity, or you are actually let go of the class a little bit earlier than the scheduled 1.5 hours for you to be able to be given a few hours or few minutes of rest before you move on to the next class. All right, so the next tip for us to avoid Zoom fatigue is that if possible, you have to start and end on time. It's a common practice in our situation that the familiar term Filipino time. Filipino time. So everyone naman is aware of what Filipino time is. So when we say Filipino time, your appointment, say for example, is 9 o'clock. So you are there 9 o'clock, but actually the event would start like 30 minutes after that, or at certain times you allot some minutes, like sometimes it's an hour before the event starts. And when you started a little bit late, so definitely we end up also a little bit late. But then since some of the participants already spent time inside the virtual room and they are actually in anticipation of what lies ahead with a particular event or a particular lecture or whatnot, they already spend time gazing at the screen or roaming around the virtual room. So spending few minutes, spending extended hours once again gazing at the screen would actually give the result of experiencing one of the many symptoms or syndromes of Zoom fatigue. So as much as possible, if you would want to avoid experiencing the different symptoms and syndromes of Zoom fatigue, so make it a habit that whenever you have a schedule, video conferencing, meeting, or class, start your class on time and as much as possible end that particular session on time. It's a good thing if you end it a little bit earlier. You are doing some of your students a favor because you give them additional time to rest their eyes and their mind in preparation for the next class or the next activity to come. Okay, so the next tip on how we are to avoid Zoom fatigue is that possible, if possible, and possibly be allowed to turn off your camera. In most cases, in an online class, to save data for online classes, some teachers do allow students to turn off their camera after like checking of attendance or if the students are actually not the one doing the presentation or recitation during online class or not doing an actual activity or a demonstration. So students are actually allowed to turn off the camera. Okay. Now, some students do have their camera as a default setting, actually open when they sign in or enter the virtual classroom. So for you to be able to turn off your camera, you could just actually set your camera setting and you can have it toggled on and off so that you'll be able to control whether or not you would want to turn off or turn on your camera as the need arises. So you do not need to be visible and online because as per discussion earlier, so being on an extended hour, presenting or being in front of other people and knowing that there are more pairs of eyes looking at you gives you the feeling of a Zoom fatigue. So for you to avoid that, if not needed, you could actually turn off your camera. Or if you are not that comfortable in front of the camera at all times, you could actually talk to your teacher and ask permission whether or not you can turn your camera on and off during your particular class activity. And of course, most importantly, for us to avoid Zoom fatigue, ayan, the most important is to work asynchronously. Ayan. So students are actually familiar when it comes to the synchronous and asynchronous mode of learning. So at certain point in our online class discussion, teachers do allow students to work on their academic requirements asynchronously. When we say asynchronously, students are actually allowed to work on their own pace, even off cam, on their own, and just submit whatever requirements before on or before the due date. They do not need to enter their virtual classroom, but rather work independently on their own pace outside the regular class schedule. If given the time to work asynchronously, if time permits, or if activity allows you to do so, might as well work asynchronously, yan, for you to be able to avoid Zoom fatigue. Ayan. And lastly, the last tip for us to avoid Zoom fatigue is really to give yourself some online space. Ayan. So when we say give yourself some online space, as much as possible, limit your time on social media or online. Kasi you have to take into consideration, one, you've been online for the longest time. Since online is our mode of communication, more often than not, online is also our mode of learning, and you've been spending like 6 hours or more doing online activities, attending online classes, and then you are very much active most of the time, either day or night on social media. Spending too much time online with your classes at one point in time already gives you that particular so-called Zoom fatigue. And with the back-to-back class, with all the academic requirements and a whole lot more, and then you spending more time online actually adds up to that feeling of online or Zoom fatigue, as we call it. So for you to be able to avoid experiencing more of the symptoms or syndromes of Zoom fatigue, better give yourself some time off, yan, or some space online. So give yourself a time out so that you'll be able to give yourself some rest to avoid experiencing Zoom fatigue. Okay, so for my last slide, I would like to leave you guys with a quote which goes like this. And if you get tired, learn not to rest. Learn to rest. Ayan. So, if you get tired, guys, learn to rest but not quit. Okay? Resting is very, very healthy because if you are actually tired of the day's hard work, you deserve a much needed rest. And this particular rest will give your body, your mind, your soul, your spirit, as well as your physical well-being, ayan, a time to recuperate, ayan, to gain its much needed energy so that you will be prepared to take on the next challenge and the next day or the next activity that you will be needing your most energy. But never quit. Never quit. So when you feel you're tired, you're exhausted, you're low bat or whatever you call it, diba? Just take a rest so that you'll give yourself, yan, a chance to regain your strength. And then afterwards, if you feel well rested, so you go back to finishing your challenges or your activity or your projects or whatever you need to settle for a particular point in time for the day, for the week, for the month. But do not quit. Okay? So, with that, I would like to thank you very much for staying with us for an hour of discussion related to Zoom fatigue. So, with that, I would like to once again invite you to come visit us next week for another topics for discussion here in the Greatness Hub online channel only in Estudiante Blue. So see you guys again next Wednesday 7 to 8 p.m. here in the Greatness Hub online channel, and you are tuned in to Estudiante Blue. So bye for now. See you again next week.